Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, January the 19th, 2023. Welcome to today's session of the PACO Workers' Compensation Roundtable. First of all, sad news. Unfortunately, our speaker for today let me know late yesterday afternoon, early evening, that she is ill and not able to join us. So what do we do when we're paralegals and plan A doesn't work out? We regroup and we go to plan B. So I went ahead and I put together a brief overview of wage loss compensation and the forms that are involved. And so we'll work through those here shortly. Before we do get started, though, we do have a couple of announcements. First of all, we have some exciting presentations that are coming up during yet this month and into February. Our general membership meeting was rescheduled to this coming Monday, I think it is, January the 23rd, and PACO's own Cassandra Struble will be talking to us about fitness and wellness issues. So if you've not signed up, I think you can still register for that, but certainly go to the website and check the calendar and register for anything that you may not have been able to register for yet. Also, something that is very exciting to me is that we are, for the first time ever, we are teaming up with paralegal associations throughout Ohio. The statewide alliance of paralegals, the Ohio statewide alliance of paralegals, I think it is. And we are having concurrent food drives to benefit our local food pantries. So Columbus, PACO is involved. The Cleveland Association of Paralegals is also involved, as is the Paralegals Association of Northwest Ohio. And that encompasses Toledo, Bowling Green, Findlay, Sandusky, Huron, and all points in between. So we are excited to be able to reach a great number of Ohioans who are struggling with food issues and hunger at this time of year. You know, everybody gives during the holidays, and then there's a lull and nobody's really doing anything, and the food pantry shelves can get bare. So we have chosen this time of year to raise some funds and some non-perishable items for our local food pantries. Here in Columbus, everything that we collect, whether it's non-perishable food items or financial donations, everything is going to go to the Mid-Ohio Food Cooperative. Mid-Ohio is a wonderful organization. They will distribute the non-perishable items to local food pantries in 20 different counties in central Ohio. And their reach, it covers approximately 10,000 square miles here in Ohio. So that's a large area to cover, and a lot of food pantries in that area. So they will distribute their non-perishable food items that they have, and also with the financial donations that they receive through partnerships with different agencies. They are able, with every $1 of donation, they are able to obtain $5.22 worth of groceries, fresh items, perishable items, to be distributed to the local food pantries as well. So it's a wonderful organization. I'm proud to be teaming up with them. Our food drive will kick off this coming Friday, January 27th. We will collect both non-perishable items and financial donations through Thursday, February the 9th. And we have in the PACO News, we've already listed several collection sites. I'm still trying to add more to those, so watch the PACO News for some additional information. And we now have a link and all of this information is being put up on the PACO website. We're also assembling a flyer with all the information that can be distributed. And the link that we have goes directly to Mid-Ohio Food Bank. So if you or your firm would like to make a financial donation, you just click on that URL code and it takes you directly to Mid-Ohio's website where you can make your financial donation. They are tax deductible. You will get a receipt from Mid-Ohio directly, and they will share with PACO the name of each person that made a donation so that we can properly thank our donors. So that kicks off this coming Friday, January 27th. As I said, we're in the process of getting everything up on the website, and we're also developing a flyer if you need that to distribute to your firm. I would encourage everybody to, send an email, send the flyer to the people in your office. Ask your attorneys, ask your colleagues, legal secretaries, IT people, anybody in the firm. Ask them to contribute non-perishable items or to help kick in for a financial donation. Ask your firm if they will make a financial donation on your behalf. We paralegals do a lot to keep our firms up and running, and we're hardworking people, and our firms can certainly make donations on our behalf to as a thank you. So that is coming up. Watch the PACO News and the website for additional information. Also, we're going to have a wrap-up party to celebrate our good works and our success in this endeavor. That will be on Thursday, February the 9th at the offices of Spectrum Reporting, one of our good vendors, one of our good sustaining members, always a huge support to paralegals in Central Ohio. And the best part is that it is free parking right in front of the building. So make plans to join us on Thursday, February 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. Our friends at Veritext are going to provide refreshments, and our friends at Borger Investigation Services are going to provide the happy portion of the happy hour. So it will be a great time. Make plans to join us. If you have any questions about the food drive, please reach out. I can answer any questions that you have. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on our presentation for today. Today, we're going to talk about wage loss compensation. What is wage loss compensation in a workers' compensation setting in Ohio? It benefits that are paid to an injured worker whose earnings have been diminished, have been reduced as a result of restrictions they might have that are due to the allowed conditions in the claim. And the rules that cover wage loss can be found in Ohio Administrative Code 4125-1-01. When an injured worker has a claim, they have allowed conditions in the claim, and they've been off work. Perhaps they can't go back to their regular job full duty because they've had a back injury and they can only lift 20 pounds, and perhaps their regular job requires that they lift up to 100 pounds. Clearly, they can't do that, so they have restrictions that are a direct result of the allowed conditions in the claim. They can't go back to their regular position of employment, but they can work, they can do something. So perhaps the employer has a light duty job that they can offer, but perhaps that job doesn't pay as much as their regular job might pay. So they have a decrease in a reduction in their earnings because they're working light duty. So wage loss would be appropriate in that situation. So in order to be eligible to receive wage loss, you have to have a decrease in your wages. If you go back to work light duty and you're making the same amount of money, your company is paying you your full wages, you don't have a reduction, a decrease in your wages, so you're not eligible for wage loss because you're getting the same amount that you would if you were working in your regular position. You also are required to provide proof that the loss of wages is a direct result of the restrictions caused by the allowed conditions. Now that's important. If you have a claim that's allowed for a lumbar strain and your restrictions are not because of the strain, they're due to herniated discs in the low back, then unless those herniated discs are allowed in the claim, you may not be eligible to receive wage loss. So it has to be, the restrictions have to be a direct result of the conditions that are allowed in the claim. And of course, as with anything, the employer can challenge a request for wage loss. They can require an independent medical examination, ask one of their doctors to examine the injured worker and determine, are restrictions appropriate? Are they necessary? Are restrictions necessary as a direct result of the allowed conditions? Or and also just to get a baseline, you know, how long will these restrictions last? So there are two different kinds of wage loss. There is working wage loss and non-working wage loss. Working wage loss is when an injured worker returns to employment other than their former position of employment, the job they held on the day they got injured. But they're receiving lower pay because of the restrictions. Like if they're working light duty and their regular job pays $15 an hour and light duty only pays $12. So they may have a decrease in their wages. So that would be one type of wage loss. The other is non-working, and that's when an injured worker is released to return to work with restrictions, but they're not able to find suitable employment within those restrictions. One thing that you have to do is you have to seek suitable employment with your employer, the employer at the time of the injury. You have to go back to them and ask for suitable employment. And if they have another job available, if they have light duty available, then that takes care of finding a job. But if say the employer at the time of the injury has gone out of business, or they don't offer any kind of light duty, they don't have any other jobs that would fit in your restrictions, then you might be eligible for non-working wage loss and be able to receive benefits to make up for the earnings that you're losing. Any request for wage loss, whether working or non-working, requires medical proof. You have to have a doctor who has examined you complete a report saying that this person has restrictions as a result of the allowed conditions in the claim. These are the restrictions. No lifting above 10 pounds, no kneeling, no crawling, no pushing and pulling, no climbing stairs. Whatever the restrictions are, there has to be a medical report from a doctor that sets forth what those restrictions are and indicates, are those restrictions temporary or are they permanent? Temporary restrictions, you're required to provide an updated report from your doctor every 90 days. And that has to come with a new exam. You can't just go to your doctor and say, hey, I haven't been here in 90 days. You gave me these restrictions then. Fill out this form and say that these restrictions have to continue. You have to have a new exam. The doctor has to examine you again. And, maybe the restrictions are the same as before. Maybe you can lift up to 15 pounds this time instead of up to 10. But you do have to provide medical proof and updated proof every 90 days. If you, in order to be eligible for wage loss, whether working or non-working, one of the requirements is that you must seek employment, suitable employment with the employer at the time of your injury. And the employer, if they have a light duty job offer or want to put you in a different position that has, fits your restrictions, they have to make that offer in writing. And it has to be a good faith offer. There is a case, and I apologize, I don't have the citation, but there was a young woman who had 2 or 3 young children at home. She was a single parent. And she went to her employer and said, I can't come back to work full duty, but I can work with these restrictions. Do you have a job for me within those restrictions? And the employer, and I don't know what their intent was, if they really didn't want to bring her back to work, or if they just didn't think of it. But they offered her a light duty job. It was in writing, everything was done correctly. But the job that they offered her was um, I think it was a third shift job. So over the overnight hours. And here she is, a single mom with young children at home. During the, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning hours, she would not have been able to secure childcare for her children, and certainly couldn't leave them at home alone while she went to work. So there was no way that she could accept that job offer. So the Industrial Commission did determine that that was not a good faith job offer that they had made to her. So, if the employer is going to make a job offer, it has to be in good faith. It has to be in writing. It has to specify exactly what will the job responsibilities be? What are the requirements for this job? How long is this job available to you? You have to put all this in writing in order for it to be a good faith job offer. So that's one requirement to be eligible for wage loss, is to seek employment with your employer of record. Another requirement is that you must register with the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services, ODJFS. You must register with them and take advantage of the services that they offer for people who are seeking employment. If you don't live in Ohio, then you're required to register with whatever state agency is in your location. But that is a requirement. And you also, you must submit a medical report. I mean, those are the three absolutes. Without a medical report from a doctor saying these are the restrictions, they're temporary, they're a direct result of the allowed condition, you can't support a request for wage loss compensation. So when you are when you have an injury and you have restrictions and your employer is not able to offer you a light duty job within those restrictions, and or your employer has closed for the season or has gone out of business, or for whatever reason you don't have a job to return to, there's a requirement that you have to make a good faith job search. You have to go out and you have to be actively looking for a job, both through Jobs and Family Services and also on your own, whether it's looking through the want ads in the newspaper or LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever job search engine you're using. You have to be actively looking for a job. And you have to, in order to be a good faith job search, one of the things the Industrial Commission or the Bureau of Workers' Compensation will consider is your skills, your prior employment, your education level. If you are out there applying for jobs as a CEO and you don't even have a GED, there's like no possibility you're going to get that job. So that's not a good faith job search, to be applying for jobs that you don't have, that you're not qualified for, that you couldn't possibly get that job. And let's back up a second. When a request for wage loss comes through, it will, if it's a self-insured employer, the self-insured employer will review the application, the job search information, the medical report, and they will make their own determinations. If they deny wage loss, certainly you can file a motion, and then that will be heard by the Industrial Commission. If the employer is a state fund employer, you have the same information, the application, the job search information, everything is submitted to the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. They will review the package and they will make an initial determination whether you meet the criteria and you're eligible. And again, if that determination is no, the injured worker has the right to file a motion and request those benefits, and then the Industrial Commission will hear that issue. So, these are things that the BWC and the Industrial Commission will consider your skill level, prior employment, your education. They will also look at the number and the quality of the job contacts you've made, and how much time you're spending looking for employment. If they find that, well, you spent 20 minutes in 1 week looking for a job and that was it, they might say that that wasn't adequate time looking for a job. If you applied to 2 employers during the week, they might say maybe that's not adequate. If you submit information documenting that you applied for 50 jobs with 50 different employers, they were all within your qualifications, they were all within your restrictions, and you simply didn't get hired by anybody, they'll take that into consideration as well. Something else they will take into consideration is a refusal to accept assistance in seeking employment. In particular, I think this is more commonly done with state fund claims. The Bureau might offer you vocational rehab services. And sometimes you hear vocational rehabilitation and you think, oh my gosh, they're going to send that person to school to learn a new trade. Maybe so. Sometimes though, those services are limited to, okay, we're going to help you build a resume. We're going to talk about what your qualifications are. We're going to talk about your abilities and what strengths you have. And we're going to get an idea for what jobs would be suitable for you and where you might look for employment. And then after that phase is completed, they might have a job coach who says, okay, let's look for some specific jobs. And, maybe the job coach, sits down and identifies 10 jobs that are available within your qualifications. Maybe the job coach helps you fill out the applications if that's something that you need. But they will provide services. And if you are offered assistance in finding a job and you refuse that assistance, the Bureau, the Industrial Commission, they might decide that you're not doing everything you can. You have a responsibility to limit your decrease in earnings or to eliminate that decrease. So they may say, well, you're not helping yourself, so you're not eligible. They'll also look at the labor market conditions. If there's something that's highly specialized, that's the only thing that you are eligible or qualified to do, and there's only like 2 places that offer those services in the entire geographic area that you live in, and neither one of them are hiring, they'll look at that. But for somebody that's able to do retail work, if you live in a metropolitan area and there are a zillion retail locations in the city, and you say, gosh, I could only find 5 jobs that were open in the retail market in my area, they might say, well, we don't believe that's accurate. They'll also look at your physical capabilities. What are you physically able to do? If your restrictions are, you can't lift over 5 pounds, that's going to seriously limit your ability to qualify for a job. And they'll take that into consideration. They'll also take into consideration economic status. If you live in a rural area, and there really is no job market anywhere near you, and you would have to drive 2 hours to find a job, and then you wouldn't be making enough money to cover the gas to get there and back every day, they'll consider that as well. And they'll also consider your attendance at an educational program. Like if you're in vocational rehab and you're being retrained, you're being sent to school to learn a new skill, or to finish your GED or whatever educational program you are participating in. They may say, well, you're spending 40 hours a week in school, so we're not going to require you to find a job working 40 hours a week as well. So there are things that they will consider. But one of the qualifications is you have to be looking for comparably paying work. As I mentioned before, you do have an obligation to try to minimize any kind of wage loss that you have. So it's expected that you're looking for a job that's going to pay a salary comparable to what you would be making if you were working full duty, or at least to minimize whatever wage discrepancy there might be. Any questions so far? Okay, I don't see any, so I'm going to share my screen because you guessed it. If it's a benefit that is being offered by the Bureau of Workers' Comp or the Industrial Commission, there's a form to fill out for that. There is a form to be completed by everything involving workers' compensation. There are just a few forms, and these are required. You do have to complete these forms. The first is, I believe up on your screen, it's entitled Application for Wage Loss Compensation. Can everybody see that? Okay. So the first part of this form, of course, they want your demographics: injured worker's name, date of injury, claim number, your address, what job did you hold at the time of your injury? How can we contact you? What's your email address? What's your telephone number? You have to specify whether you're requesting working wage loss or non-working wage loss. You have to affirm on this form that you have registered with the Department of Jobs and Family Services in Ohio or an equivalent program in the state in which you live. You have to specify what type of benefits you are requesting, whether it's wage replacement or a non-occupational and sickness benefit. And I'm not real certain what that is. I've been doing workers' comp for 28 years, and I'm not sure what that is. So that's a new one on me. You have to provide your work history. The name of, probably the first name of employer that you're going to put on here is the employer at the time of the injury. Your dates of employment, what position did you hold? What were your job duties? And then going back to your prior employers so that there's a work history. And when the BWC or the self-insured employer is reviewing your application and your job search logs, they can see, well, okay, these are jobs that they are definitely qualified. He's worked in this industry before. Scrolling down into section 6, you have to verify that you did in fact seek employment with the employer at the time of the injury. And either you're presently working for that employer, you applied for a job and they didn't have a job to offer you. Maybe that employer is out of business, or I didn't bother to apply with that employer because it would be futile. Maybe all of their jobs require lifting up to 50 pounds. So there's absolutely no use in asking because there's nothing that they could offer. You are asked to identify the name of the doctor who's going to provide your medical documentation, and also complete page 2 of the application. Because let's face it, sometimes doctors sign things and we can't read what the doctor's signature is because doctors go to school. I'm sure that a large part of medical school is learning how to write in completely indecipherable script. Maybe not, but they all have really bad handwriting. Let's see. And then there's a section asking about your job search. Either you returned to work with the employer at the time that you were working for at the time of the injury, Or maybe you're only requesting wage loss for days missed because of treatment. This is not a more common kind of wage loss, but if you have to have intensive physical therapy and you can only get physical therapy during work hours, so you can't be out there working, you can't be out there trying to get a job. 3 days a week you were in physical therapy, you may qualify for wage loss for those days that you weren't able to work. I'm going to and then of course you have to sign the application, and that verifies that you understand the eligibility. Everything you've put in here is absolutely true. You're not making any false statements. You're not trying to fraudulently obtain compensation. And this is important because down the road, if you are submitting job contacts that somebody finds out you didn't really go to those places and apply to those jobs, and it turns out that you are making false statements, this goes towards whether, one, whether benefits are terminated, and two, whether the Bureau comes knocking on your door saying fraud and trying to recover the monies that they have paid out. So the second page of the application for wage loss is to be completed by the physician. And again, it wants the injured worker's name, the claim number. The claim number has to be on everything. The Bureau of Workers' Compensation, I think it's something like 4,500 new claims every year. And if you just indicate your name is Joe Smith and you have a workers' comp claim, they're not going to be able to find you. So that information is definitely critical. The doctor has to list the conditions, the medical conditions for which restrictions are appropriate, and indicate whether restrictions are permanent or temporary. If the restrictions are temporary, and he says, look, for 30 days, he shouldn't lift more than 10 pounds for 30 days, and then he should be fine to go back to full duty work. So they've got to indicate whether those restrictions are permanent or temporary, and if temporary, how long will they last? And then in the next section, they have to be very specific about what the restrictions are. No lifting more than 5 pounds, must be able to change position every 15 minutes, must be able to elevate foot, it must be able to work with crutches, no carrying, no climbing, no kneeling, no squatting. They have to be very specific about what those restrictions are. And of course, the doctor has to sign the form and provide his address for where he's practicing. So that's just the application. The next step, if you are seeking non-working wage loss, is the wage loss statement for job search. And this is form number C-141. And again, at the top of the page, you have to identify the injured worker's name, the week. You have to complete one of these forms every week during which you're requesting these benefits, and the claim number. You have to then, and many people use multiple pages of this same form because they are applying for, there's space on here for maybe 5 job contacts, maybe just 4. And maybe you have applied for 20 jobs, and so you need 5 pages. So that is perfectly fine to submit multiple pages for each week. For this form, you have to describe the jobs that you're looking for, the jobs that you are applying for, what efforts you're making to get a job. They want the name of the employer, the address, a description of the job that you applied for, who you spoke to, the name of the contact, the date of the contact, whether the contact was in person, say you walked in to Kroger and said, I'd like to complete an application. Maybe you called and said, hey, are you hiring? Maybe you mailed a resume, Maybe you faxed it in, you applied over the internet. And then also they want to know, did you submit a resume? Did you fill out an application? Did you get an interview? What was the result of this contact? Were you hired? Did they say, sounds great, but we're just not hiring anybody? Oh, we'll be back in touch with you. Did they schedule an interview? And then in the comments, you could indicate, this person wasn't hiring. I had, a first and a second interview. I was among the top 5 candidates, didn't get the job. Or it turned out that the job wouldn't be within my restrictions, or whatever comments you want to provide to indicate the outcome of that contact. The next form is Form C-142, and it is the employer report of employee earnings for wage loss compensation. So if you are working for the same employer, then they would help you fill out the form, and they would any employer that you're working for would fill out the form, whether it's the employer at the time of the injury or somebody else, and they would complete the portion that indicates the name of the employer, the address of the employer, and for this pay period, beginning date, ending date, these were your gross earnings during that time. That is how you will document the earnings that you did have. And then what they'll do, the Bureau will look at the wages that have been established in your claim. And that is a computation that's based on the total earnings you had in the 52 weeks prior to your injury. They'll say, okay, John Smith earned $23,542.89 in the last 52 weeks. So we'll divide that number by 52. And then there's a further computation from that. But that is what they'll base your earnings on. And if it's the average weekly wage that this is based on. If your average weekly wage is $425 and they see this form and you made $425 that week, well, they're going to say, well, you didn't have a wage loss. You made the same amount that you would have at your other job. So those are all things that they will look at. Now, the next form is the all-important doctor's form. That has to be completed by your doctor every 90 days, unless the restrictions are permanent. If you have permanent restrictions, there's nothing to update. But if you have temporary restrictions, your doctor has to complete this form every 90 days, and it must be accompanied by a new exam. The doctor can't say, well, I saw this guy 3 months ago, and at that point, he wasn't able to lift more than 10 pounds. So that's what the box will check today. They want the doctor to re-examine the person, and they can lift up to 15 pounds this day. Okay, something just went really funky with my screen. So now I'm going to have to turn this way to see my screen. So this is the form that the doctor will complete. And it's very detailed. The injured worker is able to perform simple grasping activities with the left hand, the right hand, both hands, able to perform repetitive wrist movement. If you've got carpal tunnel and you can't do repetitive wrist movement, okay, is that with the left hand, the right hand, both hands, which is involved? And then it asks whether you're left-handed or right-handed. Can they perform actions to repetitively operate foot controls? Are they taking medications that would prohibit them from operating heavy equipment? And then it comes down here and asks about activities such as bending, squatting, twisting, climbing, reaching above shoulder, using a keyboard, those kinds of things. Now, there are different classifications of restrictions. Maybe they can never twist, no twisting at all. Maybe they can twist a couple times an hour, so they can twist occasionally. Maybe, twisting something that's not really a problem, and they can do that frequently, or they can do that continuously. It goes on to ask about lifting and carrying restrictions, and pushing and pulling restrictions as well. It asks whether the restrictions are temporary or permanent. If they're temporary, what's the date range? How long are these restrictions going to be in place? Are they able to work a full 8-hour day? If not, how many hours a week, a day can the injured worker work? Maybe he can only work 4 hours a day. But they ask the doctor to specify that information. And the last form, I've not seen many of these. I think it's probably not that common. Is the form that the psychologist or psychiatrist, it's the C-143 PC. And that is for a cognitive or psychological restrictions. Perhaps if somebody has an allowed head injury and they have cognitive deficits that make them not able to do certain jobs. And this is a whole different kind of skill set. Are they able to perform self-care and hygiene activities of daily living? Are they able to drive? Are they able to ride a bus? Are they able to get there? Social functioning, can they interact appropriately with the general public? If not, you probably don't want to put them behind a cash register at McDonald's. Are they able to communicate effectively with others? Accept instructions and respond appropriately to criticism? As far as thinking and concentration, are they able to perform complex tasks? Or is it just a one-step thing that they can manage? Are they able to work with somebody else or near to other people without being distracted? Are they able to make abstract thinking and do abstract thinking or understand abstract concepts? Are they able to understand and carry out detailed instructions? If you tell them, I need you to do A, B, C, D, and then finally E, are they going to be able to remember all those steps? Are they going to be able to do all those steps in the proper order? Are they going to be able to maintain their attention? Are they going to be able to concentrate on a task for the 15 minutes it's going to take them to complete it? And about adaptations to stress, are they going to be able to perform activities on schedule? Are they going to be able to meet deadlines? Are they going to be aware of normal hazards? Are they going to see a machine that has moving parts and understand, oh, I shouldn't stick my finger in that? And if not, then that's not a job you want them to do because it wouldn't be safe. Are they going to be able to manage work pressure? The typical pressure that, maybe in a factory, you're doing piecework and you're expected to turn over 20 different, 200 widgets in an hour. Are they going to be able to keep up with that? Is that a pace they're going to be able to manage? And are they going to be able to manage the stress that comes with, oh my gosh, I'm 40 minutes into the hour and I've only finished 50 widgets and I got 150 more to do, or they're gonna dock my pay or whatever the consequences. And again, are these restrictions temporary or permanent? And then the doctor's signature. Any questions about the forms? I don't hear anything or see anything in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing. So that is in a nutshell. Samantha, interesting new one. What, as far as cognitive and psychological restrictions? I think that's what you're saying, and I agree. That's not something you see very often. But perfectly appropriate if somebody is dealing with terrible anxiety or has a cognitive deficit because of a head injury, then that's something that, okay, fine, they might be able to lift 50 pounds, but there are other cognitive issues that we may not have thought about. And that is something that's new to me too, definitely. So this is a brief overview, the nuts and bolts of wage loss compensation in Ohio. There are a number of nuances. There are a lot of nuances in evaluating a request for wage loss, evaluating an application, the job search logs. How do you evaluate that? How do you determine whether they meet the criteria and they're eligible for these benefits? How, if an employer disagrees with wage loss, a request for wage loss benefits, what are some things that they might argue to defend against that application for wage loss? And so there's a lot more to it, and certainly more than we have time for to go into today. Unfortunately, our speaker today was going to be Gloria Castrodale. She is a workers' comp attorney. She represents injured workers, and she has been doing this for a number of years. She was going to talk to us about the details, the nuances of non-working wage loss. And then next month, attorney Rich Goldberg is going to join us. He is a defense attorney. And I had asked him to address the nuances of working wage loss. And what I will do is I will let him know that we have gone over the basics of wage loss, working and non-working this month, and ask him next month to address both working and non-working wage loss and the pitfalls, the nuances, the defenses, the standards of meeting eligibility requirements and that sort of thing. So it will be a more in-depth discussion next month. But I was really sad to hear that Ms. Castrodale was ill, and we certainly hope that she's feeling much better and that she's back to her old self really soon. But I didn't want to just on such short notice leave you hanging and say, well, we're not going to have our workers' comp roundtable today. So I did pull this together at the last minute. I apologize that it was very brief, that it was very vague. It was not, there wasn't a lot of detail in it. There simply wasn't time to pull together a detailed presentation. So that is all I have for today. And next month on February 16th, as I mentioned, Rich Goldberg with the firm of Scott Scriven will be joining us to have a more detailed conversation about wage loss, both working and non-working, what the requirements and the eligibility standards are, and what the possible defenses might be. Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate that. And adapting is what we do, isn't it? Paralegals, we just roll with the punches. Things don't turn out as planned. We just go to plan B and find a way around it. So that's what we do every time. So that is all I have today. I have, unless there are other questions, we'll wrap it up and you'll get 10 minutes back in your lunch hour. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us. And as always, many thanks to Spectrum Reporting for providing the Zoom link and recording today's session. Today's session will be posted to the PACO website in the next few weeks. So if you want to go back and review, you'll have that ability to do so. And I'll be sending out the CLE certificates later on this afternoon.